Hi, this is John from PythonBeginners.com, welcoming you to Lesson 3 in my free Python Essentials training course. So this Python Essentials course can be found on PythonBeginners.com, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. But if you want to get the text version of my lessons, I encourage you to come on over to my website and you can see the entire course here. Lesson 3 is all about strings, and it assumes that you know a little bit about variables and lists. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at these other two lessons, or you're familiar with them, because we're going to borrow from both of these in this lesson here. So this video is going to be following through the lesson from the website and showing you some live examples from idle as well. So let me just click on the strings link and we can begin. Alright, so at the same time I'm going to call up the Python shell, and we can sort of take a look at this at the same time. Alright, there's the Python shell there. So what exactly is a string? Well, if you looked at my first lesson on variables, you know that a string is a type of variable that has quotes around it. Okay, so this would be usually for things like words such as passwords, or sentences like comments on a blog, but it can also be for things like non-math numbers, things like zip codes or credit cards that are not meant to be used for mathematical purposes, but are more for like identification of some sort, where you never would do a mathematical calculation on it. Like, for example, you wouldn't find the average zip code or the average credit card. So typically those kinds of ID numbers are also used as strings. So from the Python shell, if I want to make a string variable, I can just do something like this. Phrase equals I went shopping today. And because I put that in quotes, and I can use either single quotes or double quotes, but as soon as I do that, Python knows that I have created a string variable. And I can verify that if I just go phrase and it says I went shopping today. I can also print phrase, and I can see it that way as well, as long as I spell the variable name correctly. All right, so you and I know that it's just a sentence like that, but what Python sees it as is basically a list of letters and spaces, and that's how it gets treated in Python. So if you look on my website here, I've got an illustration of how Python sees it. So I went shopping today is basically a list where every letter and every space has its own little storage location. And they start at 0, just like lists do, typical lists. So the letter I is in position 0. If you follow along all the way to the end, we get to position 20 where the letter Y is. Okay, the entire thing, spaces and all, is 21 letters long, but you got to remember that the space numbers go from 0 to 20. So knowing that can really help us if we want to extract part of the phrase. So for example, let me just show you some different ways we can extract part of the phrase depending on what letters we want. So for example, I can go something like this. I can say phrase at location 0. Okay, and that's the letter I. Okay, I can also do something like phrase at, say, from location 16 colon. So that means give me phrase from 16 to the end, which is the word today. I can also extract part of the phrase from the middle of the sentence. So if I go like this, phrase 7 colon 15. That means give me the phrase from position 7 up to but not including position 15. So I get the word shopping, but notice I don't get the space after the letter G, because that's not included in that number range. It goes 7 to 14, 15 is not included. I can also say go from the start to position 11. So if I go phrase from the start to 11, I get I went shop. Okay. I can also go from the back of the phrase. So if I go like this, phrase from negative 14, which means 14 back from the end. Okay, then I get the last 14 characters of the phrase, which is shopping today. Some of the other things you can do with strings is you can count, for example, how many letters of a particular type are in the string. So if I go something like this, phrase.count the letter n, I'm saying how many letter n's are there in phrase, and there are 2. I can also use index to find out the location of the first occurrence of a letter. So if I do phrase.index n and I pass in that, what I'm asking is where in the phrase does the first n occur? Okay, so it's in position 4. There is another n in there, but it only gives me the location of the first one. I can also do a replace. So I can go like this, phrase.replace the word shopping with the word hiking. This might appeal to more of the outdoorsy people out there. Okay, so now instead of I went shopping today, it says I went hiking today. One thing that's important to note though is that when you use something like phrase.replace, it doesn't actually change the contents of phrase. So if I go like this, phrase, it's still going to say I went shopping today. When you use something like replace, it returns a copy with the replacements made, but it doesn't actually commit that to the string. If I wanted to permanently change phrase, I could go something like this. Phrase.replace, well, let me try that again. Phrase equals phrase.replace shopping, comma, hiking. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm saying let phrase equal the result of phrase.replace. So now it's going to return it, but then reassign it to phrase. So if I press enter, it looks like that happened, but if I just go phrase, and then sure enough, it's permanently changed to I went hiking today. So I'm going to finish this lesson talking about placeholders. So in the middle of a string, you can insert variables such as integers and other strings, and we've learned this in the earlier lesson. So for example, say I have a variable called name, and I set it to Bob, and I have age equals 27. Okay, I can create a greeting like this. I can say greeting equals hello plus the variable name plus the phrase I see you are plus, and we have to convert it to a string because we're making a string here and age is not a string. So I have to convert it to a string to make it part of the sentence. So str age plus years old. Okay, so I'm constructing a sentence and I'm inserting variables along the way. So if I type greeting, hello Bob, I see you are 27 years old. And that's a fine way to do it. But there's an even easier way where you can insert placeholders right in the middle. So what I'm talking about here are two symbols called %s for strings and %d for integers. Okay, so let me just do that same thing again, but this time I'm going to go like this. Greeting equals hello %s I see you are %d years old. Okay, and after that I put the %sign and then I list the placeholders of the variables that are going to be used instead of those %s's and %d's. So if I press enter, that works just the same. So if I go greeting, I get the same result. Okay, so both of these are acceptable ways to inject variables into your string. But I find this way is a lot easier just because you're plugging in these symbols and it's just one continuous string, and then at the end you just say what each of those mean. And you have to put them in the right order. So I've got %s and then %d, which means name goes for the first placeholder and age goes for the second. Also making sure that d's are for numbers and s's are for strings. So we're going to finish this lesson off looking at a couple of little programs that I wrote on my website, and I'm going to paste these right into a Python programming window and we're going to run them. So the first one is called Pig Latin, and what we're doing in Pig Latin is taking a normal word in English and converting it to Pig Latin. So a Pig Latin word is taking the first letter of the word, putting it at the end, and then adding the letters AY to it. So you can see here where I'm using the input command to ask the user to enter a word to translate to Pig Latin. Then P word is another variable, which is for the Pig Latin word, equals the word from 1 to the end, plus the first letter, plus the letters AY, and then we're printing it. Okay, so I'll just put this into my programming window just to verify that this works. Okay, so I'll just run it here and see what we get. So enter a word and I will translate it to Pig Latin. So I'm going to use the word telephone. What I get back is elephone te. I could have hours of fun playing with this Pig Latin program. The other program I want to show you just quickly is a more useful program, which is a format program for phone numbers. So you know how you've got like a 10-digit phone number with area codes and dashes. So what we're doing here is asking for a 10-digit phone number, just straight digits. And then we're going to format it by putting brackets around the area code and a little dash between the 3 numbers before the end of the phone number and then put the last 4 numbers after that. So essentially what we have here is asking for num as an input, and then my other variable called phone is going to equal a bracket plus the first 3 numbers plus a closing bracket plus numbers 3, 4, and 5, which is the first part of the main part of the phone number, plus a dash plus the last 4 digits of the phone number, and then we're going to print that. So if I copy and paste this into my browser here, or sorry, into my programming window, okay, and I will run this and save it first, of course. Okay, so here's my idle shell running the program. So I'm going to enter 212-555-1212. That's got to be the most used phone number in Hollywood when they want to do a fake phone number. It's always 555-1212, and then the area code 212 is for New York City. So I always like to use this as my pretend phone number. Anyway, I type that in, I press enter, and there you have it, a formatted phone number. So strings are pretty useful, especially if you know how to extract different parts of a string and all the different handy string functions that are out there. You'll see strings come up over and over again in more advanced programs when we get to some other parts of the course. But for now, this is John signing off on Lesson 3 on Strings. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back for Lesson 4.